I had seen it a number of times. Obviously, there are a lot of people have learned that if you want to try to force somebody to think about something or do something, you can sort of get around some of the firewalls that they have in social media. And so starting right after I got back from Salt Lake City in Colorado, I started seeing some graphics sort of being passed around about how wrong James White is about the Greek term aparabaton at Hebrews 7:24. Now, this is a term that we've been discussing with Mormons for a very, very, very long time, because Mormonism has a horrifically unbiblical doctrine of the priesthood. It is not derived from Scripture. It is contradictory to everything in Scripture. It was plainly designed by someone who had next to no knowledge of Scripture. And so it is a very valuable area in which to have discussion with Mormons. And so I had seen someone saying, he's just using he's using old Thayers. Thayers is out of date. It doesn't really mean that. And I don't remember if Alma said something similar to that during our discussion or not. It's possible. Maybe that's where it was coming from. I'm not sure. The text is Hebrews 7, beginning verse 23. The former priests, on the one hand, existed in greater numbers because they were prevented by death from continuing, but Jesus, on the other hand, because he continues forever, holds his priesthood aparabaton permanently. Therefore, he is able also to save forever those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. And then it goes on to talk about it was fitting for us to have such a high priest, holy, innocent, undefiled, separated from sinners, exalted above the heavens, who does not need daily, like those high priests, to offer up sacrifices, first for his own sins and for the sins of the people, because he did this once for all when he offered up himself. And of course, could point out that in Mormonism, you have the idea of the atonement beginning in the garden, which messes all of this up. For the law appoints men as high priests who are weak, but the word of the oath which came after the law appoints a son made perfect forever. And so this is it's just a portion of an extended apologetic. Chapters 6 really gets going in 7, but there's some intimations of it before them. 7, 8, 9, and 10. And in this, you have the apologetic that demonstrates that the Aaronic priesthood, the priesthood of Aaron, was not able to perfect. And a number of reasons are adduced as to why it was not able to perfect anyone. But the argument is this is part of the old. The old's passed away. The new has come. And what you have in Jesus is a fulfillment. It is something new. It is something better. The old has passed away. The new has come. We had many high priests under the old. We have one high priest under the new. That was the Aaronic order. This is the Melchizedek order. And the Melchizedek priest has the power of an indestructible life. And so one of the emphases in Hebrews is the finishedness of the work of Christ, and hence the lack of need of any further priests to continue on this work. He has an indestructible life. So notice the contrast. The former priests, on the one hand, existed in greater numbers because they were prevented by death from continuing. But Jesus, on the other hand, because he continues forever, holds his priesthood aparabaton. Now, what I have stated and what they were criticizing was that the term aparabaton can mean permanently, forever, inviolably. But that in this context, because the specific contrast is between the old and now the new, the old passed away, hence required replacement, indestructible life will not die again. Therefore, to have the priesthood permanent means there is no succession in this priesthood, because he will hold it permanently. The high priests had to pass that priesthood on because of death. He's not going to die, therefore, he has no successors. So what this illustrates is what is called, what is in modern linguistic studies is called semantic domains. Words have a range of meaning. Now, some words have almost a dot meaning. Very, very, very focused meaning. Others, like the term logos, has a whole balloon of meaning. It's big. And it can mean all sorts of things. And identifying where in the semantic domain the author wishes to place a specific use of a word always requires context, following the flow of argument, etc., etc. And so when it comes to aparabaton, the permanency of his priesthood in light of the fact of what the high priest was and what he did would mean he could have no successors. So what these Mormons have tried to do, not generally being involved in this level of exegesis or translation of the text, has been to try to say, no, that without successors thing is just based on Thayer's. And Thayer had this meaning from the phrase parabaton namon, to transgress, that is to violate, signifying either unviolated or not to be violated, inviolable, priesthood, unchangeable, and therefore not liable to pass to a successor, Hebrews 7:24. And then reference is made to Bleak, Delitzsch, and to others. Now, let me give you some other sources, including more modern ones. Lo and Nida, aparabatos, pertain to that which does not change from one state to another, not changing, unchanging, never to change. And then they give Hebrews 7:24, and because he lives forever, his priesthood never changes. Now keep something in mind. In light of the fact this is the high priesthood, there's only supposed to be one high priest at a time. If it never changes, what does that mean? Of necessity. Again, this is interpretation language in the context which was being used, in the argument that it was being used in. Then we have BDAG. So Bauer, Donker, Arndt, and Gingrich, 3rd edition, current edition there. Usually interpreted without a successor, but this meaning is found nowhere else, rather has the sense permanent, unchangeable. Now, you're going to read that at least twice. And so the question is going to be, well, that proves you're wrong. It means it can't be passed on. No. Every term has to be understood in the context in which it is being used. In the context of Hebrews 7, where the contrast is between the old high priest and the one new high priest, who has a different kind of priesthood, has a power of an indestructible life. If it is permanent, then only he's going to hold it, because there's only one high priest. So the not liable to be passed to a successor is a translation understanding in the semantic domain of the word based upon the argument of Hebrews chapter 7. You're not going to expect to find that anyplace else. You're not going to expect to find that in secular literature, because secular literature is not going to be writing in the context of the old covenant high priesthood. The question is, what about in Hebrews, which is a unique context. What about in Hebrews? Then we have TDNT, which is Kittles, also known as Kittles. Hebrews 7:24 says of Christ that because he remains to eternity, he has an unchangeable and imperishable priesthood. Instead of the passive and changeable, many expositors suggest the active sense which cannot be transferred to another. Christ has a priesthood which cannot be transferred to anyone else. This is a natural interpretation and yields a good sense, but it does not really fit the context. We should keep the rendering unchangeable, the more so as the active sense is not attested elsewhere. Same thing that BDAG said. But when it says does not really fit the context, we're not told why. Why this particular German scholar says it doesn't fit the context. It actually flows directly from the context. That's what the context is all about. Then you have Lang, Schaff, Moll, Kendrick, etc., Commentary on Holy Scriptures, Hebrews, hath his priesthood not to be passed by, hence superseded, or perhaps better, with reference to the active parabino, go aside from, transgress, violate, transgression, violation, not to be transgressed or transcended, inviolate. And then Hughes sort of lays it out for us. The adjective aparabatos, rendered adverbially in our version as permanently, is susceptible of a variety of interpretations. Unchangeable, King James Version; perpetual, NEB; indefectible, Bruce; inviolable, Westcott; interminable, Delitzsch, represent one line of exegesis, while that cannot pass to another, Erasmus; that does not pass from one to another, Owen; intransmissible, Herring, Teodorico; inalienable, Speak, Montefiore; non-transferable, Moffat; that needs no successor, Phillips, represent another. Such evidence as the papyri afford seems to favor the former, but this is more than counterbalanced by the preference of the Greek fathers for the latter understanding. In our view, the appropriateness of the term is enhanced by its ambivalence. The priesthood of Christ does not pass to another precisely because it is a perpetual priesthood. Hughes is exactly right. The two go together. In this context, since it is permanent, by necessity is without successor. You can't avoid that. If it is permanently his, it cannot be someone else's. That's the nature of the high priesthood. The whole argument of his ability to save to the uttermost is based upon the uniqueness of his priesthood. So, the well-known linguistic key to and exegetical key to the Greek New Testament, aparabatos, not able to be passed on to another, intransmittable, non-transferable. The priesthood of Christ is not passed to another precisely because it is a perpetual priesthood. Hughes, Bruce, Moffat, we're seeing a number of people saying the same thing. The last one I'll read for you here, just to make sure that we know that this isn't just something I made up on my own. Speak has one of the longest discussions of this. And I think, well, how should we translate the biblical hapax, means it only appears one time, in Hebrews 7:24, Jesus, inasmuch as he remains for eternity, aparabaton ekaitain hierusenein. This rather rare verb is only found in late Greek. It is used only once in Philo and twice in Josephus. Etymologically speaking, parabino, pass along, pass beyond, violate. Aparabates is a transgressor, a violator, or a denigrator. So aparabatos should be that which ought not to be transgressed, inviolable. And that is the meaning, usually in a legal context, that is well attested in the papyri and even in literary writings, notably with the verb meno. But this does not fit Hebrews 7:24. He is correct there. This is not a legal document talking about contracts. This is talking about the priesthood, and the Old Testament teaching about the nature of the high priest has to be determinative as to what is being said here. One might be tempted to give our adjective the otherwise well-attested meaning of permanent, perpetual, unchangeable, as the word was understood by the Vulgate and the Peshitta, and as it is most often used in literature. But this would produce a tautology with the first part of the verse, even a banality. And in any case, this notion of a priesthood unchangeable in character or quality is not in evidence elsewhere in the epistle. Alternatively, we can posit a derivative meaning, one for which no attestation has yet been found, not passing from one to another. This was the interpretation of John Chrysostom, Theodoret, followed by Bengal, that cannot pass to successors, and it is the meaning that flows out of the context. I agree with Speak at this point. As opposed to the Levitical priesthood, whose moral ministers had to transmit their power to their descendants, an eternal priest remains unique and will never have to pass his priesthood on to any other minister. The term was apparently chosen because of its legal connotations and to justify the priestly institution of the New Covenant, which was identified as with a single person. So we translate, he possesses the priesthood, which is non-transferable. So the point being, well, first of all, it gave us, the opportunity to delve into some text there that I think is very important. And also to illustrate that rarely do you see anything on the web that has a strong exegetical background. I was going back and forth with, I think, a homosexual on Twitter this morning, or maybe this afternoon, actually. It wasn't that long ago, on the meaning of arsenokoitai at 1 Corinthians 6:10. And you could tell all he was doing was quoting from stuff that he saw on websites someplace. And, I kept challenging him. Do you actually read this language? Because he was producing a lot of eisegetical errors. And eventually I had to admit, no, I don't. So when you see stuff like this, don't be quickly moved. Do your homework. When you do your homework, you'll actually end up appreciating the conclusions you come to all the more as a result. And the fact is that the priesthood that is Christ's is not held by any 19-year-old Mormon missionary pedaling by on his bicycle. Joseph Smith didn't understand it. The Mormon Church doesn't understand it to this day. He